The humid air in the private training room hung thick, heavy with the scent of liniment and effort. It was a Saturday afternoon in the summer of 1968, a familiar setting for two men who would one day become legends, though neither yet fully knew the path. Chuck Norris, a multiple world karate champion, stood poised, his GI pristine, his posture a testament to years of disciplined power. His gaze, usually sharp and focused, held a flicker of impatience. Opposite him, Bruce Lee, wiry and compact in a simple black tracksuit, seemed almost to melt into the background, his presence defined by an unnerving stillness. Chuck, accustomed to the raw exchange of blows, found Bruce's calm almost irritating. He believed in grinding resistance, in the relentless application of pressure until an opponent broke. "Bruce," Chuck began, his voice a low rumble, tinged with a friendly challenge. "Let's really test this. Let's spar." A polite suggestion, but the undertone was clear. Chuck wanted to measure Bruce's unconventional style against the proven brutality of a full-contact exchange. He wanted to see Bruce's theories subjected to the undeniable truth of a fist. Bruce's eyes, dark and intelligent, met Chuck's without wavering. A faint, almost imperceptible smile played on his lips. "Sparring," Bruce replied, his voice soft, almost a whisper, "is a test of strength. I propose a test of control." Chuck's brow furrowed. Control, to him, meant hitting precisely, blocking effectively, enduring pain. It didn't mean avoiding the engagement entirely. He believed mastery came from confronting the storm, not from sidestepping it. In those next few moments, Chuck Norris, a man who had faced down countless opponents, was about to discover a new dimension of martial artistry, one that bypassed brute force and went straight to the mind. The setting was a small, well-ventilated gym in the heart of West Los Angeles. The afternoon sun, filtered through tall, industrial windows, cast long, hazy rectangles of light onto the polished wooden floor. The room hummed with the faint, almost imperceptible drone of the city outside, the distant murmur of traffic, the occasional bark of a dog. Inside, the only sounds were the soft shuffle of feet and the steady rhythm of their breathing. The air smelled of clean sweat, old leather, and the faint, sweet perfume of blooming jacarandas carried on a gentle breeze through an open vent. The polished wood floor, cool beneath their bare feet, reflected the light with a subdued sheen. Bruce Lee, still in his late 20s, possessed a physique that defied explanation. Not overtly muscular, his body was a living sculpture of efficiency, every fiber honed for purpose. His simple black tracksuit only emphasized his slender frame, making him appear almost ethereal next to Chuck's robust build. Chuck Norris, slightly older and undeniably larger, was a formidable figure. His GI, crisp and white, signified his rank, his achievements. He embodied the traditional ideal of a martial artist: power, discipline, and an unshakable resolve. His worldview was one of direct confrontation. Strength was about impact, about overcoming resistance. Bruce's philosophy, with its talk of fluidity and non-resistance, often seemed esoteric, almost impractical to Chuck. "No attacks?" Chuck questioned, his voice betraying a hint of confusion. "How do you test efficacy without engaging?" Bruce's gaze remained steady, devoid of judgment. "We are not testing efficacy, Chuck. We are testing control. Your control and mine." Chuck, a man of action, felt a surge of frustration. He thrived on the physical dialogue of combat. This abstract talk, this avoidance of direct engagement, felt like a waste of valuable training time. "So what is the exercise?" Chuck asked, trying to keep the skepticism from his voice. Bruce took a slow, deliberate step back, creating a small space between them. "You will attempt to touch me anywhere you can. I will simply avoid your touch. There will be no strikes, no grappling, no counters. Only evasion." Chuck blinked, a slow comprehension dawning. This wasn't about winning a fight. It was about landing a single touch. It sounded deceptively simple, almost insulting in its apparent ease. "And you?" Chuck asked, a challenge returning to his voice. "You won't try to touch me?" "I will not," Bruce confirmed. My only objective is to not be touched. The challenge was laid bare. Bruce was inviting Chuck, a world champion, to demonstrate his ability to make contact with a smaller, seemingly less aggressive opponent. It was a subtle, psychological gauntlet. Chuck took a deep breath, settling into his ready stance. He expected Bruce to move, to circle, to use his renowned speed to create distance. But Bruce stood almost motionless, his feet planted, his hands relaxed by his sides. He seemed to shrink into himself, becoming a smaller target without actively moving. The quiet tension in the room thickened. The few students observing held their breath, sensing the profound shift in the usual training dynamic. Chuck launched his first attempt, a quick, probing jab, light and fast, meant to gauge Bruce's reaction. Bruce's head tilted back, almost imperceptibly, as Chuck's fingertips whistled past his nose. There was no sudden lurch, no dramatic dodge, just a small, precise adjustment that left Chuck grasping at air. Chuck tried again, a feint to the left, followed by a rapid right cross aimed at Bruce's shoulder. Bruce swayed, his body pivoting at the waist, his shoulders shifting just enough for the blow to pass harmlessly by, grazing nothing but empty space. Chuck felt a flicker of annoyance. This wasn't a fight, it was a ghost hunt. He was swinging at smoke. He increased his speed, his movements becoming more elaborate, more aggressive. Kicks followed punches, spins followed feints, a relentless barrage of martial arts artistry. Yet, Bruce remained untouchable. He moved with an economy of motion that defied logic. He wasn't dodging. He was simply not there when Chuck's hand arrived. It was like watching water flow around a rock. The water didn't try to fight the rock. It simply found the path of least resistance. Chuck started to sweat, not from exertion, but from frustration. He was expending enormous energy, his muscles burning, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Bruce, meanwhile, seemed to barely breathe. His movements were small, precise, almost meditative. He was a master sculptor of space, creating voids where Chuck expected solid form. The minutes stretched, feeling like hours. Chuck's movements, once crisp and powerful, began to lose their precision. His frustration grew, fueled by the relentless failure to make even the slightest contact. He threw a powerful roundhouse kick, aiming for Bruce's torso. Bruce simply turned his hip, and the kick passed by, inches from his body like a gust of wind. Chuck spun, catching his balance, his face now flushed with effort and a dawning realization. He was not being outfought. He was being outmaneuvered by an invisible force. Finally, Chuck stopped, his chest heaving, his hands dropping to his sides. He stood a few feet from Bruce, defeated not by a blow, but by the sheer impossibility of the task. Bruce remained still, his breathing as calm as when they began. He had moved perhaps a few feet in total, yet Chuck felt as though he had run a marathon. The silence in the room was profound, punctuated only by Chuck's heavy breathing. The other students watched, wide-eyed, having witnessed a masterclass in something they couldn't quite define. Chuck looked at Bruce, his face a mixture of exhaustion and awe. His earlier skepticism had evaporated, replaced by a deep, humbling respect. "I can't touch you," Chuck stated, the words coming out as a breathless confession. "It's impossible." Bruce offered a gentle smile. "Control, Chuck, not strength. You were fighting my movement. I was simply moving with your intention." He walked closer to Chuck, his voice soft, almost philosophical. "When you rely on visible tension, on brute force, you are broadcasting your intentions. You become predictable. Your energy," Bruce continued, "is spent trying to break through my defenses. My energy is spent allowing your attack to pass through me like air." He explained the principle of yielding to overcome, not as weakness, but as superior adaptability. The rigid tree breaks, but the flexible reed bends with the wind. Chuck listened intently, every word a revelation. He understood that his strength, once his greatest asset, had become a limitation in this new paradigm. His training had taught him how to hit, but not how not be hit with such absolute, effortless grace. This was not about winning or losing a spar. It was about understanding the fundamental nature of engagement itself. Over the weeks and months that followed, Chuck Norris began to integrate Bruce's teachings into his own training. He started to question his assumptions about what made a fighter truly formidable. He focused on fluidity, on economy of motion, on the subtle shifts that could create insurmountable distance or render an attack utterly meaningless. The influence was profound. Chuck's style, already dominant, became more refined, more elusive. He began to see his opponents not just as targets, but as sources of information, their movements betraying their intentions. Bruce Lee, for his part, did not boast about this particular session. He never sought to humiliate or prove himself superior. His motivation was always to share, to elevate the art, to push the boundaries of human potential. The encounter became a whispered legend among those who witnessed it, a testament to Bruce's unique genius. It showed that true mastery was not about winning a fight, but about understanding the deeper principles that govern conflict. It was about understanding that power isn't always about what you can do to someone, but what you can do to not be affected by them. Chuck Norris, the champion, learned that day that sometimes the most challenging opponent isn't the one who hits hardest, but the one you can't even touch. He learned that control, in its purest form, is a form of power far greater than brute force. It is the power to dictate the terms of engagement without throwing a single blow. This story, like so many others from Bruce Lee's life, forces us to look inward. How often do we define strength by its visible manifestations? The loudest voice, the biggest muscles, the most aggressive stance. How often do we judge a person's capability by their outward appearance, their perceived size, or their willingness to engage in direct confrontation? Bruce Lee showed us that true power often operates in the unseen, in the spaces between actions, in the silence before the storm. He showed us that sometimes the greatest victory is not over an opponent, but over our own rigid perceptions. Are you constantly seeking to impose your will, to prove your strength through direct force? Or are you open to the subtle power of control, of yielding, of allowing the world to flow around you? A few seconds in a quiet gym, without a single blow struck, can redefine what it means to be truly powerful. Sometimes, the most exhausting battle is the one where you can't even land a punch. Follow Bruce Lee, Beyond the Fight, for more insights. True power begins before the fight.